The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Last fall, tonight's guest won an historic state Senate campaign against a controversial Bronx incumbent. Tonight, he's here to talk about the Kingsbridge Armory, his unique Healthy Bronx initiative, and other items of interest as he winds his way through his first year representing the 33rd District in the New York State Senate. You can join in the conversation with questions or comments by calling in at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Tonight, please join me in welcoming BronxTalk's first or second appearance, I guess, on the show by now Senator Gustavo Rivera. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's just get a little perspective from you. What's it been like? Are you enjoying your newfound position as a state senator, and from a personal perspective, what's it been like for you?
Well, Gary, I think I told you earlier, I feel that I'm exactly where I need to be. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of months to participate in many conversations that on behalf of the folks that I represent here in the Bronx that would not have happened if I wasn't there. Just to tell you one quick story that kind of sums up for me the reason why I am in Albany. A couple of days, the governor did his budget presentation, and I came down to the district, to East Tremont, and I went to a senior center where I spoke to a lady who said she needed my help. And as she's telling me her story, and I'm having it in my head, 2 weeks later, I am in the governor's mansion speaking to the governor just like I'm speaking to you. And as we're discussing issues of the budget, issues of the millionaire's tax, etc., I remember that lady's story and I tell it to the governor. And while I'm doing that, I realize that that lady is probably never going to have the opportunity to talk directly to the governor about her concerns. It is my job to carry that message for her. So it has been a wonderful experience. I've taken the last couple of months to learn. I've tried to listen more than I've spoken, and it's been an incredible couple of months. What
did that woman say to you? What did you tell the governor? And has there been a result, a positive result to that conversation?
The lady told me about the difficulties that she had. Being a 68-year-old woman, there was a senior center that she was in that she couldn't get a meal because the age range had been pushed to 70. I went to the governor and I told him the story as we were discussing the millionaire's tax. The governor obviously opposes it. I've always supported its extension. The millionaire's tax, obviously your viewers will remember it. It was a lot of discussion. Briefly, it gives us between $4 and $5 billion in revenue that would go towards programs just like the one that this lady goes to in her senior center in East Tremont. So when I was telling the governor was that I needed to go back to that lady. And I needed to tell her that I would fight for her concerns, and that I believed that to not think about the needs of her and the needs of the people in that senior center, and to give some family in the Upper West Side that had $350,000 worth of taxable income and have the tax not be extended for them, which will take revenue away from us, therefore giving us less of an ability to serve the needs of the most needy. I could not do that. And so that was a debate that I was having with the governor.
And the governor said, okay, and he changed his mind?
No, the governor was
I'm trying.
No. The governor did not change his mind. But what I told the governor, and again, when the budget came up, The budget is divided into 11 votes. There's 11 bills that you have to vote on when you say the budget. It's not just one vote. There's 11 of them. I voted yes on 9 of them, but I voted no on 2 of them, including the one that had to do with revenue. And I stood on the floor of the Senate, and I said why I voted no on that budget bill. And I said that the reason I did not vote for that budget bill was because it did not include an extension of the millionaire's tax. So ultimately, the governor did not change his mind. I disagree with him very strongly about this, and I disagree with a lot of my colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle. But ultimately, my job is to speak on behalf of the people that I represent. And I remember very well the folks in this district need that money so that they can have the services provided to them. So that is what my job is.
I guess that is the purest form of what our representative democracy is about, and I guess you're pleased to be living it. What's the biggest surprise so far? Is there something that you did not expect, or you're like, wow, I didn't realize it was like this?
Well, the fact that I actually get recognized almost on a daily basis.
In the street?
Yes, walking through the district. I just live near Lehman College. I lived like 10 minutes away, so I didn't walk here tonight, but I usually walk over. And I get recognized quite frequently. I have the opportunity to speak to people on the street, and it has been an overwhelmingly positive response.
And you didn't think that you were going to be in that position. In other words, you figured you got this job and now you're going to be going to work, and you didn't realize how visible you had become.
That is part of it. That is part of it. It is a very good experience to actually be able to speak to people. And as weird as it might sound, I have actually shocked people. I was getting something at the 99-cent store just at the corner from my house, and there was this guy that looked at me and said, "Are you that guy?" And I said, "I'm your senator." And she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, I'm buying toilet paper." And I said, just like you are. So having that, it shows me something. It shows me that many of the folks that I represent have never had the experience of having someone who has this fancy title actually, be among them. I'm not even going to talk about my predecessor and the fact that he did not even live here.
That's old news at this point.
Precisely. So the fact that they actually get to have those 3 to 4 minutes with me, I get to actually tell them, I'm here working for you. That's ultimately what my job is. This is where our office is. Please visit us. It is not my office. It is yours.
We'll get to issues after I ask you one more question. But
Yes.
The biggest disappointment? Something that has come up that you said, gee whiz, either I didn't know they do this in Albany, or something that has transpired that you said that was not a good thing.
The biggest disappointment was the millionaire's tax. I don't believe it is dead yet, and I'm not going to let it die. But the fact that we approved a budget, yes, it was an on-time budget. I do not believe it was the best budget for the state. I voted yes on most of it. But the fact that we left $4 to $5 billion of revenue on the table means that the sacrifice is not evenly distributed. We have wealthier New Yorkers, wealthier families that had a break from the federal government already, and now they get one from the state. And when I think about the folks that I represent here in the Bronx, they're not going to be well served by some of these, by the cuts that happened, and by the fact that we won't have that revenue. But I'm going to continue to fight for it.
Let's talk about what is maybe the most controversial subject, certainly in this part of the borough, and that's the Kingsbridge Armory. The task force came up with 3 plans. Do you have a favorite of the 3 plans? Is there something there that you say, gee whiz, that's what I'd like to see at the Armory, based on what I saw?
I think the most important thing about the Armory is that we have to make sure, as I've always said, I want to make sure that whatever happens there is something that has a positive impact on the community at large. It doesn't just benefit whomever's going to do the investment, but also impacts the community in a positive way. This is the first step. I believe that having this report out there gives us some general options. There's a lot of more work that we need to do. I'm working to actually involve the state more directly in this, obviously working along with the borough president, but I'm trying to work with the state, to work with the lieutenant governor's office and with the Empire State Development Corporation.
And have them do what at this point? Which now the process is the proposals, the 3 A, B, and C, or Model 1, 2, and 3 are out there, and it's going to go to the mayor's office, and the mayor ultimately, or the city hall, is going to have to issue the RFP. What role would you like to see the state of New York play?
Well, this is precisely what I'm discussing with state agencies right now. I believe that this has the potential to be a project that has an enormous impact, not only in the Bronx, not only in the community right here in Kingsbridge Heights that it sits in, but in the Bronx as a whole and potentially the city. So I want to, obviously these are ongoing discussions. My goal ultimately is, I can tell you this, I will be in the middle of it. I can see it from my window. I've told you this before. I want to be right in the middle of it. I want to make sure that whether I serve for 2 or 4 years or however long the people of the Bronx choose to send me to the state Senate, I want to make sure this is one of the things that I have a role in, to make sure that something happens there. What exactly? We don't know yet, but I'm going to work to make sure that we do it.
Some of the whispering out there from some of the people that I just simply chat with is that they like the idea of this ice skating rink, this hockey rink. In their mind, that's number one. The others, for folks who don't know, is this idea of using, and this is generalizations because there are a lot of compartments to it, the sustainable food industry or the film studio concept. Those were numbers 2 and 3. I guess the question that I have, and that has been raised by people who opposed what Borough President Diaz did with the Armory to begin with, is the number of jobs involved. Can an ice skating rink generate a number of jobs and a quantity of jobs and quality jobs, of course, that's part of the dialogue, to justify the length of time it's taking and the no vote when there was a retail center planned?
Well, first of all, I do not believe that there's going to be one thing that is going to be able to take over the entire space. This is a humongous space. It has potentially many uses, and I think that what we're talking about in these different projects is the potential of one of them kind of being the anchor tenant, if you will. So I believe that all of them have possibilities of creating quality jobs, but ultimately, it is about that. It is about making sure that we have the largest amount of jobs, that we have the largest positive impact on the community, and that is a long-term thing.
How many jobs? 470 was a number that was thrown out and said, you know what, that's the maximum number of jobs you can get out of it. Would that be sufficient for you to say, you know what, they've done the right thing here?
Well, I think I'm not really going to get into exact numbers right now, since I don't have the proposal in front of me. Right. I think that right now it does not have. It sits empty. There's nothing that happens there except some trucks from the New York City free graffiti, what have you, get parked there, and there is nothing else that's being done in that space. So whatever it is that we ultimately choose to do, I think has to have the entirety of the property needs to be used in a good way. It needs to be used in a productive way. What exactly that means, I do not know yet.
Some people said, you know what, the task force, all they did was make some suggestions, and now we're still not quite at square one, but we're really not far enough along to have justified waiting. Now it's been 1.5 years since the vote by the city council to deny the last plan. Should they have come up with firmer plans and move the thing forward? Because now it's going to sit in the mayor's lap, and frankly, Mayor Bloomberg could say, you know what, I'll let the next mayor deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. And we're, 5 years, 7 more years before we actually see something at the Armory that's productive.
Well, there's some of us that are not going to, you might have some people that want to have it just on their lap or pass it on to the next person. I'm telling you that I'm one of the people that is not going to let that happen. What exactly are we talking about? What exactly is going to happen at the Armory? What exactly is going to be there? I can't tell you yet, but I can tell you that it is one of the things that is most basic for me. We have, my district hovers around 13% unemployment. There's a $25,000 a year median income for the people that I represent. My folks need jobs. And so what I want to make sure that I do is that I participate in a process to make sure that this is a productive engine for the entire community. And I believe that we're going to get it done.
How long? 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years?
Less than 10 years,
hopefully. Less than 10 years, hopefully. Certainly, I think everybody would agree with that. Mark from Pelham Parkway joins us. How are you, Mark?
Hey, Gary, Senator.
What's up?
If you remember, turning down my TV. If you remember, Senator, I was at the forum when they had all the people who came. You were part of the board there with Majora Carter and everybody on what to do with the studio.
Got it. Mark, ask your question. Go for it.
Well, I got two questions. I think his biggest disappointment was when he got up to Albany was all the corruption and all the red tape he's got to run through. If you remember, they had a union from the film there, from the film union, and he said they have good-paying jobs, but while New York is working 100%, they import their brothers from other states where the film industry isn't doing well. And I'm surprised that nobody's put the pressure on the union, like the plumbers union and everything, to do training, because believe me, to be a dolly grip operator, to make $35 an hour or more, is a damn good job. And if you had a production facility in the Bronx with an industry that's going to generate $10 billion a year plus in New York City, I think if you get a studio there, I think your job thing would be really met. The mandate would be met, because on any given production, if you could use it, you'd have between 100 to 300 people employed at any given time.
Mark, thank you very much. The problem with many of these proposals, and some people said this is cuts to the core of the problem with this film industry proposal, and with all the proposals that say, hey, we're going to bring Bronx people jobs, is that many of those jobs require training so that these people can be unionized. Mark is asking, if I'm understanding that correctly, if we're going to have the film industry in there, we've got to start putting training programs in now. I guess, does that make that that proposal less strong than the other proposals, because this is going to require a whole series of components that may have nothing to do with literally building the armory?
I don't think so. I think that there's, regardless of what it is that we put in there, let's say, for example, that the movie industry is one of the anchor tenants, or is the anchor tenant of the space. We have had discussions with some of the unions about the fact that there is some training that is required. There is also some non-unionized jobs that are there as well for the production of it, not like the post-production as well. I think all of these lend themselves to having, for example, educational institutions nearby, like Lehman College, which is right here, just a mere couple of blocks from the Kingsbridge Armory, or Bronx Community College, which is also within walking distance. We have, and I'm not even speaking about some of the private institutions like Monroe College or Mercy College, etc. There are things that we can do to actually partner these educational institutions with some of the unions or some of the industries that actually come in there, so that we will make sure, and this is, again, it's part of the ongoing process. We want to make sure that whatever goes in there is something that has a positive impact on the community. So part of the discussions will have to include, how do you actually make sure that people from the community, people from the Bronx, are employed in whatever is there? And as part of that means that if there's some skills that we can give, if there's some skills that we can get for some local folks that are looking to expand their skill set so that they can continue in the workforce, then I believe that that's going to be part of what we ultimately do.
You were one of the elected officials who stood with Borough President Diaz just a few blocks from the Kingsbridge Armory recently to talk about public access to the Jerome Park Reservoir. What's the problem here, and what is your hope that ultimately will be at the Jerome Park Reservoir that the public can actually use?
The bottom line for me is that if it's good enough for Central Park, it is good enough for the Bronx. We have I don't know the exact number right now, but we're having, there's a ton of space, a ton of green space that is available that is currently non-accessible from the people that live right beside the reservoir. So what I ultimately want to make sure is that the commitments that were made from the city to the community are kept, and that if there's going to be some access that is provided, that it be done in a timely fashion, and that we have access to those green spaces which we currently don't have access to.
I was at a community meeting recently, and some of the numbers were talked about that it could cost $8 million, $10 million. There may even be more involved in renovating pathways and other things. How do you find the money to do something like that?
Oh, 8 to 10 million in a couple of $1 billion budget is something that we can potentially find. And if we have an agency, if we have a city agency saying to the community, we want to give you access to this, we want to make sure that you have, just like in other parts of the city, that we have access to it so that we can use it in ways that will be positive for the community, I believe that 8 to 10 million is not an insurmountable amount of money. I think we can find that somewhere in the city budget and figure out how to move things from here to there so that we can have those commitments be kept.
Let's go to the phones. Our buddy Bob from the Bronx News. Sometimes he's from Riverdale, sometimes he's from the Bronx News. Nonetheless, it's our buddy Bob. What's up? How are you, Bob? Do I have him?
Are we still there?
We are. Go
Is
ahead,
that Bob Press?
You talk about getting jobs, but people need education to get jobs. And our District 10, where you live, and has 45,000, 50,000 children now, has always been a poor-performing district. Mayor Bloomberg came in, got mayoral control, and things have not gotten better. They've really gotten worse.
So ask your question.
Go ahead, Bob. Going to do to help educate our children, and when mayoral control comes around, what would you change in it besides giving parents more of a voice like everybody, other politician says?
That's a very good question. Do you like mayoral control? Would you support the concept? And then number two, if you would support the concept, are there reforms that you'd like to see?
I'm not very supportive of mayoral control. I think that there has to be, ultimately we have to have accountability, and I believe in accountability, but I do not believe that, there's many people that believe that if you put the market, the idea of the marketplace, the idea of competition in an educational system, much like you do in the private sector, that ultimately you would create good results. I disagree with that on principle, because in a private sector, if you have two companies that are competing against each other and they're making widgets, and one of them is more effective than the other one, and then this one fails because this one sells for cheaper or is more effective, then that isn't ultimately a positive. That's what somebody that believes in the marketplace. That's ultimately a positive thing. We can't do that with education, because education is not about some people are failing. If some people are failing, that means that the whole system fails.
Many people would say, you know what, we don't want to go back to that old system, which was a patronage system, and there was certainly corruption in probably every school board in the Bronx. Is there a middle ground, or really, if we eliminate mayoral control, we're going to basically be going back to the old ways, when that was as bad for yet another reason?
I believe that there can be a middleman here. I always believe that there's ways to actually bring good concepts together. Accountability is a positive thing, but when you have a system that is driven by the idea that you're going to have schools kind of competing against each other, you ultimately do not create the best result for the majority of the population. And that's what we have to strive for. We have to strive to create an educational system which will serve the majority of the population, not a small percentage of the population. We have to make sure that we educate everyone. And that is a difficult thing. I'm not saying it's simple, but there are certain things that we have to do, and we have to get away from a system, I believe, that is kind of ultimately driven by a market mentality, because competition does not create just better schools. It creates better schools for this amount of people, and then the majority of the children are left in places where they do not learn.
Is the legislature that you have found and are learning about in the state of New York sophisticated enough to deal with the kinds of nuances that you're talking about? Because what generally happens is it becomes mayoral control or the old way, and it becomes very difficult for people who are talking various types of, interpretive middle grounds to get that point across so that others will support it.
Usually I consider myself not an optimist, but a pessimist. And usually I consider myself like not a glass half full, but a glass half empty, and there's a hole somewhere in there, so you got to look for it. But as it relates to my job as a legislator, and as it relates to my job as a representative, I have to be an optimist, and I'm an idealist in certain ways. What do I mean by that? I mean that even with the difficulties inherent in trying to find a middle ground, in trying to find something that makes sense from this one and this one, I'm going to be an optimist, and I'm going to say there are ways to do this. Right now I'm in the minority in the state Senate.
On this particular issue?
No.
You meant
I'm
politically.
talking politically.
Yes,
as a Democrat,
sure,
I am in the Senate minority. But I believe that the Democrats will get back to the majority. Now, we were not ready last time, but I do believe that we will be ready next time. And as part of that, it means that we have to start conversations about all of these issues, about issues of equality as it relates to taxation, as it relates to an education system that actually serves children and is not driven by a market mentality, as far as many, many issues across the board, for having a fairer housing policy. All of these issues, I believe that we have to start talking about them, and we have to start saying there are ways that we can take good from here and good from here, and we can come up with more complex, but ultimately better results as far as policy.
An issue that was voted on by the New York State Legislature most recently that didn't seem to have a middle ground was the idea of gay marriage. What did you think of the nature of the argument on the other side, in particular by your colleague, Senator Ruben Diaz, who said that he voted with his faith first? Is this what a state senator should be thinking about when it comes to important legislative issues?
Well, Senator Diaz and myself agree on 95% of things. We both represent districts that are very similar to each other as far as poverty, as far as the ethnic makeup of them. But there are certain things that we have very strong disagreements on, and this is one of them. For me, this is an issue of basic equality, basic civil rights. If you have two individuals who are adults, who choose to share their life with each other, then we as a state should not have the ability to keep them from enjoying the same rights that everybody else does. What I believe that we did when we voted for marriage equality, and I proudly cast my vote for it, is that we just accepted something that we should all have, that should be obvious. Everyone is equal, and everyone should be equal under the law. Faith is something that is separate, and I respect the Reverend's faith, and I respect everyone's faith that is opposed to this particular issue. We are not asking any institution, any holy institution, if you will, to bless a union between a man and a woman that choose to marry each other. That is, we would never ask any religious institution to do that. What we are doing is, in our role as a state, we are protecting the rights of individuals to be equal. So that's what we did there.
Just before we wrap up, and frankly, you probably could do a half hour on this, is this idea of your healthy initiative, the Bronx Can Initiative. Mm-hmm. So we have a little bit of time left. Tell us what it is, why it is, and what you'd like Bronxites to do.
Well, unfortunately, in the Bronx, we live in the unhealthiest county in the entire state. High rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease. So we thought, what can we do?
45 seconds.
I partnered up with the borough president to actually start something called the Bronx Can Health Initiative. BronxCan.com, by the way. It stands for Changing Attitudes Now. What can we do every day? What can we do a little by little to actually become healthier as individuals, ultimately as a community? I weighed myself publicly. I weighed in at 299 pounds. In October, I will be by 279 is my goal, but ultimately the goal is to make sure that everyone knows we can be healthier as individuals, and ultimately we can be healthier as a community. BronxCan.com.
BronxCan.com. We've put the phone number for your district office on the screen. Your first visit as a state senator, I hope it will be the first of many.
Absolutely.
And Gustavo Rivera, thank you so much. Because as I do every show, I got 50 more pages of questions. We just never have time for it. But thank you for your time tonight.
Absolutely.
And good luck in Albany, and we'll hopefully continue the dialogue at a later date.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Now, next Monday night, we talk about a new development initiative on Southern Boulevard. Should be good. So we'll see you then and every Monday night at 9 for Bronx Talk. Special thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Michael Arias, Dina, and all the others who work on our show. And to you, good night.
And so the king ordered his men into battle, and even though he was no longer acting in their best interest, they followed obediently. But what if they didn't? What if they just refused? What if selfish leaders got no support? What if people had the courage to stand up when something wasn't right? What if the government didn't just serve a lucky few? What if it was designed and run for all the people, no matter what race, color, or creed? What if we didn't put up with anything less? What if?